privacy. Let me just, I want to riff a little bit about privacy here. Because, frankly, I think most Americans don't get it. Back in 1773, 3 years before the American Revolution, in the fall of 1773, a fellow by the name of Rusticus, that wasn't his name, it was his pseudonym. We still don't know who it was. We believe that at least one of the pamphlets attributed to him was actually written by Samuel Adams, but nobody is even sure of that. Started posting flyers, bulletins they called them in the day, on houses, on trees, that were pretty off the wall. Actually, no, I don't have a copy of Unequal Protection here within grabbing range, and it's no big deal. That's, but I quote a number of these in my book Unequal Protection. And it's just, these were open calls for rebellion against the East India Company with regard to the tea. And these anonymous posters led right to the Boston Tea Party. Period, end of discussion. I mean, that happened. And the founders and the framers of the Constitution, particularly Jefferson and Madison, got it. That if you want to have periodic revolutions in America, and I'm not talking about violent revolutions, although that's what ultimately the Boston Tea Party led to the American Revolution. But we've had a series of revolutions in America, whether it's the end of slavery, arguably that came about as the Civil War, the enfranchisement of women, the Civil Rights era, the gay rights era. I mean, on and on and on. There have been a number of revolutions prohibiting alcohol, legalizing alcohol. There's been a lot of them. They had nothing to do with violence, but they all came from the people, and in many cases, they came from the people organizing anonymously. Because they knew that if they tried to organize out in public, or if the government, or if the corporations that they were working against in some cases, I mean, keep in mind, our country was kicked off on an anti-corporate act of civil disobedience and the destruction of private property, the Boston Tea Party. That had those people known who they were, they couldn't have done it. Well, nonviolent protest has always been the most successful. Violent revolutions tend to produce, I mean, sometimes they produce really significant change. That's how our country got started. But frankly, over the long term, and you know, there's a number of, David Swanson actually makes a very good argument in his book, War is a Lie, that even the American Revolution and the Civil War did not have to be fought as wars. That they could have been just as successful had they been nonviolent actions. But anyhow, it's increasingly looking like the United States is about one generation away from completely forgetting what privacy means. And the consequences of that great forgetting are going to be tragic for our nation. Because without privacy, without the ability to be anonymous, Americans can't even plan a peaceful revolution or nonviolent progressive social change movements, because if big corporations or Big Brother are watching, they can block efforts before they even become public. Seriously. In recent years, we've learned about the massive surveillance systems being built by the corporate state. For example, we now know about the warrantless wiretapping of American citizens after 9/11. We know about TrapWire. This is a law enforcement tool that keeps track of our movements in major cities across the nation through closed-circuit cameras, facial recognition software, and license plate readers. And we know the enormous spy center being built by the NSA in Utah. It's going to house just like zillions of things, our emails, our phone calls, our text messages, all of it in one place. The NSA can now hold the digital version of 500 quintillion pages of text. That's a lot of data. What's worse, Americans are increasingly willing to give the surveillance state and Snoopy corporations whatever they want. Right? Oh, hey, isn't this cool? When I go to the New York Times, it gives me ads that are just exactly what I'm looking for. Louise and I really noticed this after her cancer diagnosis, and with breast cancer, which has so far been successfully treated with surgery and chemo. But to the point, she did a lot of Googling about breast cancer, and now pretty much every website she visits, she gets ads for everything from chemo wigs to cancer treatments. And it's like, huh? How does this website know? We're sacrificing privacy for convenience and interconnection. We're enthusiastically posting our locations, our pictures, our personal information on sites like Facebook and Twitter. I mean, people are starting to figure out this might have a backside. It might kick them in the butt when they're like looking for a job. And all of a sudden, the pictures from when they were 17 and drunk are there for the world to see forever. But even worse, all of these are monitored by the corporate surveillance state and by those corporations themselves. Your web experience is now carefully compiled and examined so big corporations can make more money advertising directly to you, targeting you. How do advertisers know what you want? Because they've been collecting data on the websites you go to and what you search for, and they're reading your emails. All of this arguably is a blatant violation of individual privacy, but when you say, yes, I click on the terms and conditions, yes, I read those, no, you didn't. Yeah, I know you didn't, you know you didn't. And as a consequence of that, online data collection is now a multi-billion-dollar industry. This level of surveillance would have been unthinkable from the founding of our country. In fact, our founding fathers held privacy to be one of the highest rights. They wrote it into the Fourth Amendment. And today we just accept these invasions of our privacy. But in Europe, they're not accepting it. Citizens in other democracies are not as naive or as passive as Americans, at least in Europe. Under pressure from the EU, the European Union, Facebook has announced that it's scrapping its facial recognition software and deleting all the data that they got from it. But here in the U.S., they continue to use it. Even though people like the Electronic Privacy Information Center, EPIC, is opposed to it and speaking out loudly about it. We just don't have the laws that are needed here in the United States to protect privacy online. And as long as advertisers can make bucks, big money on knowing your habits and your secrets, we're never going to have those laws because Citizens United gave those advertisers the right to buy your members of Congress. But there is no comprehensive federal privacy statute that protects personal information. Instead, a patchwork of federal laws and regulations govern the collection and disclosure of personal information. And it goes on and on. So can you imagine? I mean, in Europe, there's a Bill of Rights for online users. It's called the Data Protection Directive. And in Europe, they've got new laws coming down the road to protect people, online users, and hit governments and corporations with heavy fines. The Europeans have figured out this is a big deal. Now, just consider, Rusticus posted this. This is from my book on equal protection. Rusticus posted this thing on the wall, or on a whole bunch of walls and trees and whatnot, all over the place. Are we in like manner to be given up to the disposal of the East India Company, who have now the assurance to step forward in aid of the minister to execute his plan of enslaving America? Their conduct in Asia for some years past has given simple proof how little they regard the laws of nations, the rights, liberties, or lives of men. They have levied war, excited rebellions, dethroned lawful princes, and sacrificed millions for the sake of profit. The revenues of mighty kingdoms have centered in their coffers, and these not being sufficient to glut their avarice. Maybe they were talking about Bain Capital, I don't know. And these not being sufficient to glut their avarice, they have by the most unparalleled barbarities, extortions, and monopolies stripped the miserable inhabitants of their property and reduced entire nations to indigence and ruin. 1,500,000, it is said, that'd be 1.5 million, perished by famine in 1 year, not because the earth denied its fruits, but because this company set the price so high that the poor could not purchase them.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 866-987-THOM.
So the question, had the East India Company known who Rusticus was so they could have him arrested or shut down, would we have had the Boston Tea Party, the American Revolution?